Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Get Out the Vote rally. This is the last day of CCH's Housing Equals Justice Conference, and we couldn't think of a better way to end. I am so excited to be here. I've got my red, white, and blue on and my Housing Equals Justice shirt, and I'm excited to be here to welcome all of you to our conference and to this Get Out the Vote rally. My name is Madeline Ravish. I'm here from Connecticut Coalition to End Homelessness, and this conference, if you're just tuning in for the first time, we have been focusing all weeks on the topics of racial justice, criminal justice, and economic justice as they relate to homelessness. We've been doing a deep dive into COVID and its implications for homelessness. We've looked at families, youth. We've looked at a lot of different issues. And voting is obviously a really important one, so really excited to have this session as part of our conference. And so if you're enjoying the conference, please help us tell the world that housing equals justice. We do have hashtags ATI 2020, housing equals justice, and end homelessness. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So please help us tell the world that housing equals justice. And of course, we'd like to thank our presenting sponsors, Bank of America and Zillow, who've made this whole conference possible and made it possible for us to welcome all of you free of charge, which is the way we feel it should be. So thank you so much to Bank of America and Zillow for sponsoring our conference. And if you haven't visited our CCH store, please do. We have shirts, we've got mugs, we've got masks, and it's a great way to tell the world that housing equals justice. Proceeds go to our efforts to end homelessness, so please check out the store. And so we have some amazing speakers here today. We're thrilled to welcome Jerry Jones from the National Alliance to End Homelessness, Bob Junda from Disability Rights Connecticut, Dina Talbert from the National Healthcare for the Homeless in Maryland, Stephanie Klasky Gamer from LA Family Services, and Ann Faust from Coalition on Housing and Homelessness, who is here with Denny Young and Clayton Burkhart from LEAD. So we are so excited. We are going to turn it over in just a moment to Sarah Fox, our own Sarah Fox from CCH, who will talk a little bit about what we're in for today with this rally. But first, we have a little surprise. We're going to turn it over to our CEO, Richard Cho, who is joining us from our town, Hamden's Town Hall, ready to mail his ballot, which felt like an appropriate way to kick this whole thing off. So, Richard.
Great, thanks, Madeline. Just wanted to actually share here. I'm here at Hamden's Government Center. It's a town where I live in, and just wanted to show you just how easy it is to vote this year. I want to just send a message. You know, elections really do matter. You know, elections are important and they have consequences. I worked for a president who made ending homelessness a top priority in our country. And it really matters who's in the White House and who's in Congress and who are representatives and members in Congress. And so your vote really matters. This year, it's become easier to vote than ever. Many states now have the ability to do mail-in voting, not just if you're absentee, but because of COVID. And so I just want to show you how easy it is to vote. Here's my own mail-in ballot. And every town in Connecticut has actually created these ballot boxes where you can just drop your ballot. So I'm literally just going to do this. Put my ballot in, check to make sure it's there, and it's done. So that's as easy as it takes. It's the easiest thing you can do to make the biggest difference in ending homelessness and for changing the destinies in our country. So thank you so much. I'm really excited for this panel. Thank you so much to Jerry and everybody who's joined this panel today. I'll turn it back to you.
Hi, I'm Sarah Fox, Director of Advocacy and Community Impact for the Connecticut Coalition to End Homelessness. As Richard said, voting is more important today than ever before. We have 25 days left until the general election. And then voters like you will head to the polls to vote for the president, and in Connecticut for all 5 members of the U.S. House of Representatives, so our Congress people, and for all 187 members of the General Assembly. I'm speaking to you in just pure enthusiasm because I know just how important your vote is. And today you're going to hear from amazing speakers from across the nation about the work that they're doing in their communities to help their clients vote. We're going to raise up the fact that every voice, every vote matters. In fact, in some races across our state, it can come down to 1 to 2 votes, and that makes a difference in the election. So for you and for your clients, getting out to vote is key. So listen wholeheartedly. Check your inbox after this for some key tools that you can use to help your clients vote. And head to the polls on election day. And now I'm going to turn it over to Jerry Jones from the National Alliance to End Homelessness.
Thank you, Sarah. I think we all understand the high stakes in this election, especially for unhoused people and millions of others who are struggling to pay the rent. Homelessness is getting worse in many parts of this country. The national number is up. There is a rental housing crisis that's unfolding with no agreement between the White House and Congress for emergency rental assistance, which means there's a very real potential for widespread evictions once the CDC moratorium expires at the end of this year. And combined with that, coupled with that, we are living with the long-standing consequences of a failure by policymakers to address the root causes of homelessness and housing insecurity in this country. Most obviously, we're simply missing about 7 million units of low-rent housing in this nation that are needed for our poorest residents. And that's a gap which has been growing year after year for decades. And so we have a legitimate crisis on our hands. And the crisis of homelessness is only one part of a larger set of issues facing the country right now, from the pandemic to the recession to the persistence of systemic racism to really the breakdown in our governing institutions, courts. We know what works, and so this situation is particularly frustrating because we know what it would require to turn it around. In Connecticut, you have shown how it's possible to reduce homelessness statewide at a faster pace than the rest of the nation. You've shown that it's possible to make tremendous inroads on veteran homelessness and other groups. But that progress is only possible with the right policies and with smart coordination and with the necessary resources. We've had a hell of a year as a country, and it's not over yet. And I think that the entire country is kind of going through this parallel dysfunction of bad policy making in the face of an emergency like the pandemic. And in that situation, we also know what needs to be done. Listening to public health officials, whether it's standing up a national testing program or getting serious about contact tracing or all the sort of common sense precautions like masks and social distancing and hand washing and the like as we research and wait for a vaccine. Yet, like homelessness, the lack of public investment to support what works and the absence of a coherent national strategy has led to incalculable needless suffering. And I think these are signs of a society that's in real trouble. Our elected government is not doing very well, and none of this can be fixed without building a healthier and more representative democracy. For homelessness, what that means is the only path forward on this issue is to support leaders and elected officials who are committed to funding the services and creating the space to bring people inside, and ultimately to confront the near disappearance of affordable housing in this country. Homelessness is not a natural sort of consequence of the human condition. It's not inevitable. It is a failure of public policy. And we have witnessed in this era of modern homelessness 4 decades as this has drug on, knowing that it doesn't have to be this way and that it didn't used to be this way. We didn't used to have hundreds of thousands of people living out of doors across this country with nowhere to go. We didn't used to have always encampments in downtown districts of major cities. We didn't always have so many people panhandling in the entrances to shopping centers and on the off-ramps to highways and interstates. We can trace the beginning of mass homelessness to changes in public policy and budget priorities, which means this is a problem that can be solved by changing public policy. But those changes only come if we have elected officials who support better choices. And without those changes, homelessness in America and the scarcity of affordable housing is getting worse. And that's why elections are important. That's why voting is important. And it matters when so many people in this country, eligible voters in this country, do not participate. In the last presidential election, 27% of eligible voters voted Republican, 29% of eligible voters voted Democratic, and 41% didn't vote at all. We have to do better as a democracy, especially when we've seen so many elections, certainly in my lifetime, where a relatively small number of votes determine the outcome. The most famous example has to be the year 2000, when the presidential election was determined by 155 votes in Florida, the closest presidential election in U.S. history. In 2016, a shift of fewer than 80,000 votes in 3 states, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, would have changed the outcome. And that's 80,000 votes out of a total of 137 million votes cast, which means 0.6% of everyone who voted for you. On the issue of homelessness, voters in Los Angeles County approved Measure H in 2017. It was a $3.5 billion ballot measure to fund outreach and rapid rehousing and a range of homeless services. $3.5 billion in a single county to fight homelessness. And that kind of money makes a tremendous difference when you're spending it and when you're not. And while Measure H passed, it only passed by 4,300 votes out of more than 500,000 votes cast in that election. And that works out to about 0.7% of everyone who voted. San Francisco now has hundreds of millions of dollars in new homelessness funding because voters turned out for Prop C a couple of years ago. But it didn't pass by much either. Every vote matters. And I would argue that the non-voters and the unlikely voters, the folks who are unlikely to show up next month without additional encouragement, the people who deserve our attention the most are the least well served by Washington and Hartford. It's the people who are bearing the brunt of bad policymaking. Those are the voters we should be working the hardest to empower. First of all, because they're the ones with the most to lose. But just as importantly, they're the voters that our elected officials need to hear from the most. They're the ones whose absence and lack of involvement in the process is allowing Washington to drift further and further away from basic problems that we have to confront as a nation. When politicians are insulated and isolated from the needs of average people, when they can win re-election while ignoring the plight of people who are living on the sidewalks, people who are being failed by the current policies, that's a recipe for the larger situation that we're confronting now. And so for me, and certainly for the National Alliance to End Homelessness, at the top of the list of high priority voters that we need to mobilize are people experiencing homelessness. And there's work to be done. Everyone who is homeless right now, if they haven't done so already, would need to register to vote because by definition, they've had a change of address. So if they were voters before, they need to update their registration if they want to participate. And if they haven't voted before, this is the election to start if there ever was one. Connecticut's voter registration deadline is on October 27th, which is about 2.5 weeks from today. Connecticut is also one of those states, as Richard mentioned, where you can register and vote in person on election day if you meet the eligibility requirements for voting. Those requirements are you have to be at least 17 years old and turning 18 on or before election day. You have to be a United States citizen living in Connecticut. And if you've ever been convicted of a felony, you have to have completed your confinement and parole. Those are the basic rules. And thanks to the U.S. Constitution and the state laws of Connecticut, that's pretty much it. So as my old friend Michael Stoops used to say, you don't need a home to vote. People experiencing homelessness are eligible to vote in the communities where they are living and surviving right now. And it's our responsibility to help them exercise that right to vote. We have a number of experts who are joining me in a few minutes to describe how their organizations are registering and turning out voters, especially people who are unhoused. After the session, I'd invite you to check out the National Alliance's website at endhomelessness.org, where there's an entire section devoted to our Everyone Votes campaign. And if you check out our social media feeds, probably 4 out of every 4th or 5th tweet is about the Everyone Votes campaign. There's lots of links to resources. And we also have on our website a toolkit that we wrote with homeless advocates and providers in mind that has useful advice about how to run voter registration drives, how to mobilize new voters to the polls. That toolkit can be downloaded from our website too. But beyond the logistics of registration and turnout, it's important, I think, for those of us who spend our days working in low-income communities and people who are homeless and disabled people, people in need who aren't finding what it is that they need. It's important for us and the people we serve to use this moment to get involved and to speak out. We need to confront the larger problems that are creating that unmet need. And the truth is, we live in a participatory democracy. And democracy only works when the people do. We have to put in the work of the pursuit of the creation of a good, livable world. And we have to do it personally. It's not something that the government's going to do just because we pay our taxes. Voting is an essential step, and it's a very basic one. But we're called on to do more than just pull a lever every 2 years. We're called on to roll up our sleeves and get involved. And I know that shelter staff, social workers, and providers on the front lines of fighting homelessness understand that truth better than a lot of people, because you know what it means to get involved. You know what it means to be engaged and be accountable in your community, especially to people who are being poorly served by the status quo in Washington and Hartford and Middletown and New Haven and all the other towns and cities. We have to participate and get involved. That means showing up on November 3rd, or casting a ballot early, and it also means helping others to make their voices heard too. That's a message we need to communicate, that as individuals, as citizens, as human beings, we have a responsibility to be personally and deeply involved in the problems within our communities and the solutions to those problems. And the more distant we become from those obligations, the less power we have as people and the less legitimacy our society has as a whole. Now, having said that, I want to invite some of the experts who have joined us today to describe how they are reaching new voters in 2020. I'm pleased to introduce the team at the Coalition on Homelessness, Housing and Homelessness to describe some of the voter work their organization is leading in Middlesex County. Meriden and Wallingford, we're joined by Ann Faust and Clayton Burkhart and Dina Young. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jerry. Those words were inspirational. I'm with the Coalition on Housing and Homelessness. We work in Meriden, Wallingford, and Middlesex County, Connecticut. We help coordinate the homeless response system in our area, in our CAN. One of our committees is called Leaders in
Leadership, advocacy, educate, and development.
Yeah, and development. And they are people who have experienced homelessness in their lifetime, and they advocate for change in our system. They have the guts to tell their story in front of legislators, Rotary clubs, any youth groups. They really are an amazing group that's been together for about 10 years. And they've done multiple voter registration drives over the years, and they have it down pat. So they're going to tell you the logistics that's involved in that. But what they bring to the table is kind of the moral authority that they've been in people's shoes who have been homelessness. And when they set up a booth in front of St. Vincent de Paul or in front of Amazing Grace Food Pantry, they bring with them a sense of trust from the community. So and their voice matters and is respected within the homeless community. So I think that's something unique that they bring to the table. For my part, I was in charge of the communications. So I went to GOTV, and they have templates for flyers that you can personalize. So I just made this flyer that gave the information as to where it would be held and some links to other registrations. That the GOTV website has many resources. I created the event on Facebook, and then I turned it over to Clayton and Denny, and they took it from there. So with that, I'll let Clayton explain to you what he did to get ready for a voter registration drive. Last year, they registered over 80 people. I think they're over 30 right now and counting. So even in a pandemic, it's been a little bit harder, but we've still found a way to do it safely. And with that, I'll let Clayton tell his story.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Clayton Burkhart, and I belong to the LEAD group here in Middletown, Connecticut. We've done several registration campaigns here in town. To do this is really simple. All you have to do is go to the town hall, pick up some voter registration forms, several actually. Plan where you're going to set up. We had ours set up in front of St. Vincent de Paul outside. It's a soup kitchen. We had hand sanitizers, we had wipes, we had pens that were individual people that they kept, that they used when they registered. We had gloves that they wore. We also set it up to keep a social distance. So then we double checked the registration forms to see if it was filled out properly. A lot of them we found that didn't sign it or they didn't date it. So we had to grab them real quick and have them sign it and date it. Just on a personal note, on my behalf, as a citizen of the United States, it is our right to vote in any election as long as you are registered. I have never missed a vote since I was 18 years old. I'm 58 now. I voted locally, state, and federal. Even when I was homeless for the last 20 years, I still voted. Thank you very much.
Okay. And now Denny will tell her piece in this.
Like Ann said, we have in last year we were able to get about 80 voters, people registered, and then this year we set up in one spot and we were able to get 21 people in a matter of 3 hours. And then some of the others of the LEAD group have gotten people at a different location, and they were able to get a few people there also. But I think that it is one of the best ways that we can participate in legitimate democracy, and that's how we're able to get heard. And register people to vote is helping in our society, and our society is as much as we can get it in many aspects, including homelessness. Another one of the many topics that we have. We need to reach people, however, did by the kitchen board pantries are and other places that reach people. Creating art, making flyers, which your power of your conviction that we're able to talk to people face to face. Interaction on social media, and I also teach the young people about why you need to know and how to plug applications and stuff. It's very, very important. And I'm questions. No questions. Okay. I'm really glad to be here with everybody. And by the way, my name is Jenny Young, in case I didn't introduce myself, which I might not have. I'm here social distancing with my grandson and doing his school online. So I really thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Denny and Clayton and Ann. We will have time at the end of the program to have some discussion among the panelists, and we're also seeing the questions in the Q&A chat box. So if you have specific questions, either for a particular panelist or for the group, send them to us there. I now am hoping we can share a video. It's only about a 90-second clip from LA Family Housing about their voter work. And we're very glad to also have Stephanie Klasky-Gamer, the CEO of LA Family Housing, to say some words following the video. But this shows what providers who are operating shelter resources, as well as having tenants in supportive housing and having lots of intake from clients, what you can do. It's a very inspiring video. So with that, let's roll the clip.
LA Family Housing is an amazing organization rooted here in the community for the past 3 decades, helping families and individuals transition out of homelessness and poverty. 75% of people experiencing homelessness in LA County are outdoors. It's heartbreaking and it's criminal for us as a society to leave people outside like that. Homelessness is felt here in Los Angeles. What we do to address that is vote. So LA Family Housing is so proud to be leading an effort in registering more people experiencing homelessness to vote this year than we've ever done in the past.
The goal for Leading the Vote Home campaign is to register 2,020 people experiencing homelessness to vote in the 2020 election.
Not just registering people to vote, but hosting a polling station here at our campus in North Hollywood.
People experiencing homelessness think that they are ineligible to vote just based on the fact that they're homeless, and there's nothing farther from the truth. This initiative is important because we believe that lack of accurate information and lack of access are 2 direct forms of voter suppression. And this initiative aims to combat that by reducing as many barriers as possible to ensure that people experiencing homelessness know that they're eligible to vote, that they can register to vote, and that they can cast their ballot come November 3rd.
Because change doesn't happen without your chance to vote.
Thank you so much, LA Family Housing, for producing that clip. I'm very pleased to introduce Stephanie Klasky-Gamer, who leads that organization and who I think is doing some of the most impressive work on voter turnout, voter registration among homeless providers. So Stephanie, tell us what you're doing and what other providers around the country can take away from that.
I'm not leaving my house without this mask on for 25 more days. So anyway, thanks for showing the video. Hi, everybody. I'm Stephanie Klasky-Gamer with LA Family Housing. Just one piece of information about that clip, about the trailer that was done. It was produced by Amazon as a trailer that showed a couple weeks ago when Stacey Abrams' film all in the fight for democracy was shown around the country. So we really appreciated the opportunity to, sorry, I just need to change something. We really appreciated the opportunity to highlight our work and to share what LA Family Housing has been doing. As the video showed, we launched our Leading the Vote Home initiative a couple months ago with an effort to enroll 2,020 people, clients, participants, tenants, staff, to vote in this 2020 election. That was a very ambitious goal. We wanted to cast the net broadly. We understand nationally statistics show about voter registration drives generally register about 2% of their goal. We are closer to 20% of our goal, but we still have, as I said, 25 more days, because in California, you can register up until the day of election. So as Jerry mentioned, LA Family Housing is one of the leading homeless service providers here in Los Angeles. We serve about 11,000 people a year by providing from street outreach to comprehensive case management and housing stabilization services. We are developers of housing, both interim or bridge housing, as well as permanently supportive and permanently affordable rental housing. We have about 27 properties. And as I said, this year likely targeted to hit about 12,000, serving 12,000 people a year. We really employed all of our staff, from street outreach workers to case managers, to help enroll participants to vote. It was started with a large training effort. Everything we did has been bilingual. Both our ballots and our training efforts have been bilingual to cast the broadest net to serve the most people and to connect with the most people in both registering them to vote. And we did this in consensus with the count for the census. So during the past month or so, the training of staff, case managers, street outreach teams, volunteers has been fantastic. In addition, we've also used all of our social media platforms to highlight both the right for people experiencing homelessness to vote, and they can use our address if needed. But also, LA Family Housing has been a strong advocate for a measure on our ballot right now. Okay, so there's a measure on the on the Los Angeles ballot right now that has to do with our county budgeting process and a redirection of law enforcement dollars to be funneled into housing and community service benefits. So we've been advocating for that particular ballot measure, because as we all know, we can't advocate for any candidates, but we can educate on ballot measures. Leading up to the election, or a week before the election, we, as was noted in the film, LA Family Housing and our Irmis Family Campus has been designated by the County of LA as a voting center. So we will be open beginning October 26th through Election Day on November 3rd, where people can register to vote, cast their ballot, and then come Election Day, if they choose, to vote on site as well. So we're really proud to be a voting center. In addition to that, to the work registering everyone to vote, educating people about voting, and then being a voting center, our teams are also going to be transporting people to polls, to drop boxes, etc. So during this whole pandemic, LA Family Housing staff of 400 have continued working every day, probably working more than we did pre-pandemic. And we became street educators through our outreach teams, primarily on health issues to slow the spread of the pandemic. We've adjusted how we've done our work to be safe and avoid the spread. And that includes how we transport clients. So using all those same safety precautions, we're adding that to the work that we're doing. And then finally, or maybe I did hit everything I wanted to hit, we've actually been doing a real education campaign, not just on registering to vote, but on the importance of voting. And that's been a big part of our social media presence, but also for our own staff, many of whom come with lived experience and perhaps didn't grow up in households where voting was a priority. And so As I said, I walk around with this mask for the last couple months and will through the end of elections, but just really featuring how critical it is, particularly in this time, to let our voice be heard, to be sure that marginalized communities like the clients that we serve are not suppressed and that they are able to share their voice through their vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm pleased to introduce next Dina Talbert. She is with Healthcare for the Homeless in the city of Baltimore, and they are also reaching out to their clients to engage them in this election, and we're so pleased to have Dina with us. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Dina Talbert, and I am employed with the Healthcare for the Homeless in Baltimore, Maryland. So I think they already have been doing voter registration for the homeless population that we serve. We did it again this year, and one of the things that we wanted to make sure that they understood, number one, is that their vote does count. There was a misconception, as others have spoken about before, regarding not having an address. So we have a couple of emergency shelters as well for our convalescent care and other services that we provide. So if they don't have their own lease signed home, they're able to use the shelter address. So we were able to get quite a few people registered. And so we're really happy about that. I think it's important because it ties in with what we stand for as an organization in the city of Baltimore. It is one of the largest homeless organizations, and we're very proud because we look at it from a holistic point of view. We offer a variety of services to try to help the individual come to some wholeness in their life. Now, those services include housing, we do advocacy, we do mental health, we do psychiatric care, we do dental care, we do physical health care. They're able to come in and do doctor appointments. We do behavioral health and addictive services support. We have support groups. So all of that in a round circle can help the individual to feel some type of wholeness in their life. Of course, the most largest aspect of what we do is for the housing, because as we know, if you're not housed, your life is not complete. So we want them to feel like they're on that road to securing that type of housing, and voter registration is important. One of the things that we do, we educate the providers, the case managers, and staff, because staff sometimes can have a great communication with our clients because they come in on a regular basis. So we provide the providers with information on how to integrate conversations of voter registration and the importance of it, and how they can play a major part in that just by registering. So it's entailed with telecommunication when they do televisits via telephone. You know, they're trained to mention those aspects and the importance of registering to vote. We have registration going on. Maryland's deadline for voter registration is October the 13th. All registrations must be in. So Monday through Friday, we have been offering voter registration. And of course, we were following the CDC guidelines with the 6 feet social distancing. We used a projector so that the person that's trained could also go line by line and assist the individuals in completing the forms. We also printed registration forms in Spanish because a lot of our population are of a Spanish minority. And so they were able to complete that without any problems. I think one of the most important things is the accessibility, because our clients come in every day. We open up at 7:30 in the morning. So they're there, signs are posted, encouragement is given by the people at the front desk. So we definitely tried to encourage everybody, and we had various options for them. If they had felonies, we were informing them that the state of Maryland, and I'm not sure if it's federal or not, but you cannot be convicted of any voter complications, selling or buying votes, and you already have to have finished your convictions or imprisonment. So a lot of people were not aware of that, and they thought because they had felonies that they were not able to register to vote. So there were a lot of misconception in regards to ideas, which I think held back a lot of people, including of a permanent housing location. So as I mentioned, they are able to use our shelter location addresses, and the cards can get mailed to them. Fortunately, we're downtown in Baltimore, so the Board of Election is right around the corner. So we're able to immediately take the forms and get them in so that they can be counted as registrations and the cards can be issued. I think that it's extremely important, and because of the pandemic and the rearrangement that we had to do regarding home visits and communication with our clients, 50% of it, I think, fell on the providers as well, because they speak with the clients more regularly, and some of them still aren't coming in, so the communication is via telephone. And they were able to speak to them and let them know that we do have this registration going on, and our rep payee clients as well, they come in, so they were also informed and provided information. And we have a lot of clients who just said, okay, I can take it home and fill it out. And so we had the square registration forms that seals, and you're able to post a stamp on it and go ahead and drop it in a box. We gave them information as well regarding once they register, if they got it in early, they could request a mail-in ballot. We gave them information sheets on the locations of where the polling places are. We only have 31 this year in the city of Baltimore. They had a list of that. They had a list of drop-in container and devices that you can just drop your ballot in. If you had a mail-in ballot, a lot of people wanted that information as well. So I think that we did an excellent job. We had a great turnout, and I'm very happy to have been a part of that. We are taking registration up until Tuesday, and then we'll go ahead and turn in the rest of them. So I think that this is a great idea. I want to thank you very much for allowing me to explain what we do down here in Baltimore. And we're very proud to be part of this whole movement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dina. That was great. I'm pleased to introduce our final panelist, Bob Jundeff with Disability Rights Connecticut. He's going to describe the statewide program that his organization is organizing to boost voter participation.
Thanks, Jerry. Hi, I'm Bob Jundeff. I'm the Interim Executive Director at Disability Rights Oregon. And Disability Rights, or did I say Oregon? That's because I'm in Oregon at the moment, but I am from Disability Rights Connecticut. And we are part of a nationwide system of protection and advocacy organizations. There are 57 organizations across the nation who are fighting for access to voting for people with disabilities. And in Connecticut, we have a special project that's been working on that for years. There's 3 primary points at which people with disabilities can run into interference in blocking their ability to vote. And one is just having accessible voting places. In other words, places where people can go who may have problems getting around because of a mobility issue or a vision issue. There's having access to voting by mail, which creates its own problems. If a person may have difficulty using their arms in writing or in seeing a ballot. And then just being able to place that ballot, getting it to a drop box or to a mailbox or a way to get that ballot in to be counted. In the disability world, we have a phrase that says, nothing about us without us. And there's nothing that realizes that more than voting, because if a person doesn't vote, they don't have an opportunity to have a say in the whole variety of services and systems that affect them every single day. And no one should be turned away from having that right to participate. Being turned away from that right is not being allowed and not realizing the ability to fully participate and be integrated into the world around us. So Disability Rights Oregon has been, Connecticut has been looking at how Connecticut can make voting by mail actually accessible. Connecticut's really kind of new at this, and its system for allowing people with vision impairments and other types of limitations to complete their ballot is in its infancy in many ways. So we've been working with the National Federation of the Blind to work on increasing the access to that type of voting system. We have been monitoring localities to see if their drop boxes are placed so that people with disabilities can access them. Part of that is allowing people to drop off ballots from their cars and also to have ballot boxes placed in such, drop boxes placed in such a way that everybody can use them, not just someone who is of the correct height or has the correct muscle movement. In addition to that, again, there is just having polling places that are accessible. So if a person goes to a polling place, for example, they do need to, and they're online on voting day and need to come late so that they may be there after hours, they can still vote as long as they're online, but that might be physically trying. And so they do have a right to ask for a chair or go to the front of the line in order to be able to vote, because their disability requires them to be able to do that. All of these things, all of these details are set forth in a guide that we create and is available on our website, and we will mail it to you if you call to request it, that outlines all of the details of voting in Connecticut. And we stand ready to help anyone with a disability who is experiencing any type of difficulty in voting. And remember, just because you are homeless does not mean that you cannot vote. Just because you live in a nursing home does not mean you cannot vote, or live in a group home, or live in a family that's dissuading you from using your voting ability. This is a part of participation in our society, in our state, and it affects us all every day. And Jerry, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about what we're doing in Connecticut.
Thank you, Bob. That was great. And thank you to all the panelists. We've saved a little bit of time at the end of our hour to have a group discussion, so I'm hoping we can bring up all of the panelists to the screen. And I want to maybe start the discussion with a question we received in the Q&A chat, which I would ask the Connecticut participants, and I think Clayton and Denny, you probably and have encountered this in your voter registration. The question is about, you know, if you're homeless, which address do you use if you're filling out a voter registration form? Is there a voter identification requirement at the polling place? I can speak from a national perspective to say we should encourage everyone that we mobilize to vote, that if they turn up at the polling site, don't leave without voting. Everyone is entitled to at least a provisional ballot. If there's any question about whether they're eligible to vote at that particular precinct, for them to fill out a provisional ballot, which will be counted once it's verified that they were eligible to vote. But some of these questions differ state by state. The question about addresses, different requirements for voter ID. So let me pose that to the group, and staff from Connecticut Coalition to End Homelessness may also have some insights.
You can use a shelter address as your address, or in Middletown, we got permission from St. Vincent de Paul Soup Kitchen to use their address. So, you know, I don't know exactly what the state law is, but that has been what we have done, and we haven't had any issues. You are supposed to bring a photo ID to the registration poll, but if you do not have one, you can sign and use your signature. And I would assume they validate your signature somehow.
Thank you, Anne. I think that answers the question. And I know in other parts of the country, shelters and providers are allowing their organizational addresses to be used in the same way. Dina, you mentioned that's something that's happening in Baltimore too.
Yes, I also wanted to just add, I just found out recently that you can actually come into the polls and physically register. If you don't have a permanent address, you are able, as she mentioned, to use a shelter address, or there's another piece of identification if you are housed. And so you can use that as long as it has your address on there. But the thing I wanted to identify is that you have to sign an oath. And then the other chief judges will come over to verify that you're signing that this is where they can send the card and you are that person. And then you are still permitted to cast your vote as well while you're there. So I just wanted to say that.
Very helpful. Any other comments on that specific question from the panel? The other question I think would be useful for those watching, and this would be especially for the provider organizations who are on the panel, insights on what has been a particular hurdle or challenge or pushback you've gotten from clients that you're asking to register. A lot of Connecticut organizations who are watching this might be thinking about, how do I use the next 2.5 weeks to register people who are coming to my organization. Cite a snag or a challenge that you had to figure out a solution to, and what that solution was.
Well, I think, I'm sorry, Bob, did you want to go?
Go ahead. Please go ahead.
Jerry, I think one of the things that I personally noticed was some of them just did not have an interest in registering at all. And so it certainly isn't my obligation to go back and forth or even discuss my personal viewpoints on why they should. We did let them know that there are issues on the table, such as healthcare, that makes a big difference in how the voter registration and the voter count comes out. And so without getting too personal, too overbearing with my own thoughts on that whole process, the only thing that we could do was encourage them that their vote does count, because you gotta be very, very careful. Because there are other underlying issues as to why people think the way that they do, and it's not our responsibility to convince them either way. So it's a thin line that you kind of have to, feel your way through without being self-righteous. Let me just say that. So we just encourage them that your vote is going to matter. You might want to just go ahead and register, and if not, we completely understand. I mean, that's kind of a broader way to encourage them and allow them to still be valid in their own thought process, whether they want to or not. You have to allow them at least that choice, because then you're taking their choice away if you're demanding that they must. So, yeah.
Jerry, I'd just like to jump in and say that's a great question, because what we're talking about here is empowerment. Just take people with disabilities. About 20% of Americans have a disability. And this is a group of people who live in a world that was built for 80% of the population. And for years and years, they were disregarded and considered to be secondary citizens. So you're starting at that point. And so we're all working on is a process of empowerment and explaining and sharing with people their experiences and letting them know that they can have some influence on their lives and they can fully participate in our society. That's available to them. And we're here to work with them to make that happen. And it's not all going to happen overnight, but it's something that is part of our everyday work, and we share that with everybody who's on the panel today.
That's a great insight, Bob. Those are very wise words. I think that's a great point to end this discussion that we should all take to heart. And so once again, I want to, on behalf of the panel, thank you so much to the Connecticut Coalition to End Homelessness for having a GOTV rally as part of this week's conference. I want to pass it back to Madeline on the CCEH staff to wrap us up.
Thank you all. This was wonderful. We are so happy that all of you were able to join us today. So thank you so much. Next up, we have Building Our Movement. It should be a really great session. So I hope that you will all make sure that you do do everything you can to get your clients out ready to vote. And we have some tips that actually just went out to you. They should be landing in your inbox any minute. That has some really specific nitty-gritty tips for making sure that you are able to vote and help your clients, if you have clients, get out to the polls or get their ballots in. Anyway, thank you all to our speakers today. Next up, we have Building Our Movement, so please do join us for that. Following that, we will have the Hamden Virtual Town Hall on Homelessness, followed by Help Not Handcuffs, Improving and Reducing Police Responses, and we will end with Happy Hour. We hope you all join us for Happy Hour. So thank you so much. Go vote, help people vote, make sure we get out the vote, and thank you all to our speakers and to Jerry for coordinating this whole thing. It was great, and thanks so much. Have a great day.